Solomon now reigns as what we might call co-regent. He has been confirmed as king, and he reigns with David now until David passes the baton on to him through the event of his death. And this time that these men spend together reigning over Israel is time where the old king will be able to mentor and shape and encourage and influence the new king before he shuffles off the stage for good. "I'm about to go the way of all the earth," David said. "So be strong, act like a man." To our culture, that sounds almost offensive, doesn't it? Act like a man. David is unashamed in his desire that his son would be manly. But see how David defines manliness. "Observe what the Lord your God requires, walk in obedience to him, and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations, as written in the law of Moses." Isn't that fascinating? We so horrendously misunderstand masculinity that we think of it as connected with gains in the gym and avoiding responsibility. Here we find out that the manliest men take God seriously and live in accordance with his will. It's a beautiful picture, isn't it? Now, before he dies, David writes a kind of hit list. The transition of authority was a time of great vulnerability for a new king. If ever there would be a successful uprising, it would happen then, in the transfer of power. And so we're told that Joab is on the list. This is heartbreaking. Joab and David have been friends. They've fought side by side, but Joab has shown himself to be hot-headed and hard-hearted. He killed Abner when he ought not to have done. He joined in the rebellion of Adonijah, of course, in the previous chapter, attempting to claim him as the new king of Israel. Joab is too dangerous to be allowed to live. He makes the hit list. Next on the list, Shimei, son of Gera, the one who called down curses upon King David when he was fleeing from Absalom. And then, of course, when Shimei found out that David had regained his authority, he went to him, he pleaded with him for peace, he received a promise from him, "I will not kill you." Well, David was as good as his word. He said, "I will not kill you," and he never did. But now, on his deathbed, he calls for the assassination of that man who had once so badly disgraced him. There are two ways to look at this, and the Bible is silent about which way is best. Some people think that this was a wise, preemptive strike, or perhaps this was worldly thinking and unnecessary worry governing David. We are not told how to think about this, but either way, these things happened, and Solomon's throne was firmly established, we read. These are not the only killings that take place. Adonijah foolishly oversteps the mark. He requests that Abishag the Shunammite be given to him in marriage. This was the woman who was brought in to be a kind of private nurse of sorts to King David on his deathbed. Now, she was a servant of David, and David has now vacated the throne. She is officially now the servant of Solomon. But Adonijah, who has already rebelled against Solomon recently, says, "I want you to give her to me in marriage." Solomon takes great offense at this and says, "You might as well request the kingdom," Solomon says. "May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request." And indeed, Adonijah is killed in verse 25. Abiathar, the priest who went along with Adonijah in the previous chapter, he likewise is hunted down. Instead of being killed, Solomon says, "I will not put you to death now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David and shared all my father's hardships." But Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word the Lord had spoken at Shiloh about the house of Eli. Well, Joab gets wind of what has happened. Those three who were involved in the conspiracy in the previous chapter, one is dead, one has been exiled, and so he knows next they will be coming for him. See that he flees to the tabernacle, thinking that he will be safe there. The messengers arrive in verse 30. The king says, "Come out." Joab answered, "No, I will die here." That message is brought back to the king, and verse 31, the king commanded Benaiah, "Do as he says, strike him down and bury him." So a load of brutality and bloodshed in this chapter. As we close today, consider this. When Saul came to the throne, a great many people doubted him and diminished his importance and thought very little of his place within Israel. Can this man rule over us? And so on. David had an even harder time ascending to the throne, despite serving the nation as a soldier for years, and the clear command of God to anoint David as their king. David faced a huge amount of opposition, didn't he, before being granted the throne. This swift, decisive action in chapter 2 from the legitimate king ensured that all people would know that Solomon is the king. You might not like this parallel, but this much is certainly true. One day, all will know that Jesus Christ is king, and they'll know it for two reasons. Firstly, he sits upon a throne. Secondly, he judges his enemies. Those who make peace with him in this life will gladly sit under his reign. Those who rebel against him and refuse to turn from their sin and towards him, they will receive the punishment their sins deserve in the life that is to come. How can you ensure that you do not go the way of Shimei, Joab, Abiathar, and Adonijah? Here's how. Make peace with the king, gladly bow the knee, and one day he will greet you not as a foe, but as a friend.